Former US President Donald Trump brands his successor Joe Biden an enemy of the state at a rally, while an investigation into materials taken from his Mar-a-Lago home continues.
Exchanging blame, Moscow claims it has repelled an attempt by Kyiv to retake Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, as it goes partly offline amid shelling.
More than 50% of the residents of Nikopol, which is near Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, have fled their homes to escape shelling.
A record 33 million people have been affected by the heavy monsoon rains and flooding in Pakistan as UN agencies step up support to the government's relief efforts.
The humble native town of Mikhail Gorbachev, Privolnoye, reminisces over the late Soviet leader and what he did for their region.
Supporters of former US President Donald Trump gathered in Pennsylvania on Saturday ahead of his first political rally since federal agents searched his Mar-a-Lago estate last month. Just a day earlier, a judge released a list of seized materials which included 18 documents marked top secret. The 76-year-old said the FBI operation was one of the most shocking abuses of power by any administration in American history.
The shameful raid and break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, was a travesty of justice that made a mockery of America's laws, traditions, and principles before the entire world. The entire world was watching, and they're shocked. They're shocked.
Trump also took the opportunity to criticise his successor, Joe Biden, ahead of the November midterm elections.
He's an enemy of the state. You want to know the truth? The enemy of the state is him and the group that control him.
But as Trump lays the groundwork for an expected 2024 presidential run, he faces a number of legal challenges. 48 empty folders marked classified were also found at his home.
One intriguing element that I'm sure investigators are trying to better understand is the discovery of dozens of empty folders bearing classified markings. And it's not clear at all from the document what was supposed to be in those folders, what happened to those documents.
This comes as Trump's former Attorney General Bill Barr says the US government appeared justified in raiding the former president's home and that he suspected they had good evidence of obstruction.
Europe's largest power plant has partly gone offline amid continued fighting, according to the United Nations nuclear watchdog, as Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange blame over the shelling. Despite the presence of representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the Kyiv regime once again tried to seize the plant. According to the Russians, two groups of motorboats, with a total of more than 250 people from the Special Operation Forces, tried to dock on the shore of the Kakhovka reservoir, which houses the nuclear power plant. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered Vladimir Putin mediation to help resolve the crisis, as it did for the grain agreement back in July, according to the Turkish President's office. While Russians and Ukrainians accuse each other of attacks on the nuclear power plant, fear gripped the population in the neighboring areas. Natalia Istokos, a mother of three who lives in a small village nearby, says that almost every day she can hear the sound of explosions. But it's not the shelling that scares them the most. As a precaution, authorities distributed iodine pills and masks to the residents. Some of the mothers now go with their children to pick up the pills at the same schools where their children used to have classes before the war.
Every day, many of the residents of the Ukrainian city of Nikopol have been forced to flee their homes for its surrounding villages, with many of them sleeping out of their cars or tents. Attacks on Nikopol, which is just 10 kilometers from Ukrainian Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, have intensified over the past couple of weeks. Residents often return to the town to work or check if their homes were destroyed by shelling. Maya Cherniz is a math teacher who has been regularly making this trek. She says, so far the house is intact. Every time we leave Nikopol, we are worried. We are praying to God. Well, I'm praying to God, so we can get back to our house intact, because some people were just left out without homes. The Russians are selling at night when people are sleeping. However, during the last days, they started to shell during the day. Russian forces have controlled Europe's largest nuclear power plant since March. Over the past couple of weeks, both Russian and Ukrainian forces have accused the other of shelling near and at the plant. We are not afraid of the Zaporizhzhia power plant, but to the people who are there, the Russian soldiers, they are shelling it and accusing our soldiers of doing it. And for Ukrainians, it doesn't make sense to shell it, because Ukraine knows what Chernobyl was. And nobody would ever have in mind to shell the nuclear power plant. We are waiting. Hopefully the Russian soldiers will be kicked out from there. More than 50% of Nikopol's residents have left the city, according to local authorities, and many of its remaining residents have been forced to sleep in basements and shelters.
Houses and livelihoods laid to waste as Pakistan reels from the devastating floods that have left thousands of families homeless. Another 57 fatalities have been registered by officials, bringing the total death toll in the flood-affected areas to at least 1,265. This woman says, "My house collapsed in floodwater. I am going through a hard time. When floodwaters hit, I took my children on the road. I come here to collect timber. No one from the government side is helping us in this trouble." Meanwhile, Sadat Ali is living in a makeshift shelter in Jafarabad, along with his family. He claims he hasn't received any help from the government or aid organisations. My village is submerged in floodwater, he says. We couldn't even get the stuff out. After facing hardships, I evacuated my children. You can see we didn't receive ration, a tent. We made a plastic sheet shelter and my children are inside and becoming sick. The United Nations Children's Fund says more than 3 million minors are in need of humanitarian aid and are at risk of malnutrition and waterborne diseases. According to the World Food Programme, it has expanded its operation and is providing essential food supplies such as flour, peas and salt to affected families.
This small town called Privolnoye in the south of Russia, some 1,200 kilometres from Moscow, is not known to many. But its school once taught one of the country's most renowned figures, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last Soviet leader who passed away on Tuesday at the age of 91.
After some time in the 9th grade at school, he was awarded an order for participating in the harvest. He was a perky, smart, well-read and active guy. He played an active role in our school. He took part in artistic performances and he was also the secretary of the All-Union Leninist Young Communist League organisation.
Gorbachev eventually left Privolnoye, which is home to around 3,000 souls, to study in Moscow. But he later returned and became the region's Communist Party committee chairman. And over the years, he didn't forget the town. The head of the Privolnoye Territorial Administration says he helped the village a lot when asked. The head of the village before me also addressed him, and before that too. We built a church and had problem with the domes. He helped. Gorbachev came from humble beginnings. His parents were farm labourers who worked in the Privolnoye's wheat fields. His mother and father were both buried in the town. The modest home where Gorbachev spent his childhood no longer exists, but his parents' last home is still standing in the small town. There have been lobbies for it to be made into a museum to honour the late leader, but they have been to no avail. A show of strength and agility, the Highland Games are one of Scotland's sporting highlights, where people from all walks of life can appreciate the country's culture and heritage in the most stunning locations. One of the many games that take place in the summer is in Braemar, and it's traditionally attended by the Queen. But this year, due to her health, she has had to abstain from the event, sending Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, instead. And the royal presence was much appreciated.
They always come to the games. They don't, all the family don't come, but there are always represented by probably about, the main group. The Queen herself is not able to come now, but her son is here and the others.
It was disappointing but not surprising. We weren't expecting her to be here, but it was nice to see, Charles and Camilla and Princess Anne and her husband.
The royal couple mixed business and pleasure, officially opening a new structure celebrating the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, Before the tossing of the cabers, the tug-of-war and dancing began.